So we have Amelia Winger-Bearskin in conversation with Valencia James coming up next. And with that, here we go.
I got into coding because I wanted to do things that I couldn't do by myself. And being able to collaborate with machines meant that I could do things that I do poorly faster, and then I could do things that machines do poorly better. The first place I started performing was with my mom, who was a storyteller from the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. I would play the Iroquois rattle and drum while she told stories. I then became a classically trained opera singer. I started composing and directing and making more and more emerging technology mixed with live performance and opera, and kind of ended up in museums. Nowadays, I use a lot of different media, AR and VR or interactive media, to tell stories, co-creating with other types of non-human systems. As an artist or as an activist, I look at the way that the Iroquois Confederacy was built. We said that anything that I'm doing now is the result of 7 generations behind me. Anything I do will have a lasting impact on the 7 generations ahead of me. We use stories as a way of taking values and ethics and putting them into the core of innovation. I started looking at the media landscape we have now. How do I take information and encode it for future generations? A lot of my work is really about creating an ethical framework for software development and design, and articulation of values and ethics within technologies, with the understanding that we need to future-proof these. There's a notion that the technology we've created now has outrun us. No one knows how to regulate it. We accidentally opened this Pandora's box and we can't get it all back inside. But actually, we can choose to use technology to build a more just world, a more equitable world. We can demand that. We can say that we want algorithms that are human-centered, that are for our environment, that are pro-democracy. We can articulate the values we want to see in technology and communicate those to 7 generations in the future. What do we want to achieve with the culture and social network that we're creating?
I would just disagree because, like, I'm still, because when we first met in the summer, so when I first got to know your work and we got to the amazing panel together, these concepts were still quite new for me. Like, I mean, I felt like the urgency of it in me, but being in this space of really interrogating, these technologies that we're using every day, and then reflecting on just my relationship with what's happening in this moment, with thinking about how we can um, push against systems of colonialism, and also the importance of, like, racial justice and the immediacy of it, has and then I remember you told me about how important it is not to center the colonizer.
Yeah.
And so I've been just really, like, reflecting on that. So it's just like starting to sink in. So all
Well,
that.
I loved being part of that stop work, and I hope I didn't ask like really dumb questions. But it's okay to
Oh,
ask dumb questions. Like just for anyone who's watching this,
yeah,
like it's
there's no
okay
dumb
to ask
questions.
dumb questions. Like I'm not saying anything about all the dumb questions in the world because those are sometimes useful. But I did ask probably some dumb questions, and it's mostly because I just think you have such a treasure trove of ideas and projects that you're stewarding or that you're guiding or that you are creating a bag to hold this community in, and it has technical protocols but it has community protocols. And as a community, you're breaking ground in this new virtual space with a group of people that have, some of them have done it before, most of them haven't. Most of them, this is kind of like a new project. Maybe someone like Lajeunesse has done it a million times, but like, some people it's like their first time in VR. And I was just wondering if there was a way in which you could, maybe it's inventing a lexicon or at least centering the lexicon of your group and superimposing that over the way that people talk about tech rather than trying to then use tech words to talk about it. Does that make sense? And that's why and I apologize to your collaborators where I was like,
we're talking about open source and like, maker community and like kits and having things be off the shelf assembled. And I've heard that way of talking before, but I haven't actually heard what's truly Valencia about this project before. And I wonder if that voice could be used so strongly, even when you're talking about the code base or the kits, or I was like, what would that look like? Like if we were to look up a terminology index in this project, rather than finding the usual terms that would be defined as like, what is VR, what is community VR, what is mocap, what if they were your words? I don't know, is that like too crazy
No,
to
no,
say?
and no need to apologize at all, because that was really, well, that's why I was so happy that I invited you, because it was like, yeah, we can get someone really poking in those right places, because that's super important. And that's one thing that would be really important for us to do, is to demystify what we're doing, demystify what is the technology that we are using, and what it is we want to create with it. So so yeah, so to that end, we're working on a series of like Medium articles.
Oh, nice.
There's already one out by Thomas Wester of Glowbox, who you met at that stop work, about what is volume, what do you mean by volumetric, because that's like one typical question that comes back when I try to explain to like my friends or my dad, like, what do you mean, like. And so so I can like send that a link to that a bit later. But we're talking about how do these technologies work, how does like depth sensing camera work, and how it uses light and pixels and lights, and how it like bounces off the body, and how it's picked up by the cameras. And so the whole idea is about how do I, as a performer, appear as a 3D video inside a virtual space, so that someone who is on their web browser in that space can change the location of where how they're looking at the performance, and kind of feel a sense of a 3D kind of experience. So yeah, I mean, it's a work in progress.
Yeah, because I mean, I think about like people who are inventing these technologies, um, they bring with them their worldview in the way that they describe them. And when we're working in spaces that we didn't invent, we could also invent our way of talking about those systems, or moving through those systems, or changing them, right? Like you could say people talk about motion capture in this way. It's primarily used in enterprise training. And yet, my group is not thinking about it in that way. We're thinking about it as, you know, sharing the places on our body that you can look at in a different form.
Mhm.
And I don't know. I mean, obviously you know what you're going for, but I wonder if it's like, it's kind of because these spaces are newly defined, that doesn't mean that those will be the definitions that last forever, or the ones that you have to like accept. And so I wonder if there is something that is so unique to your collaborative that you begin to speak about it totally differently. It's like you might meet people who've never heard of motion capture before and don't know what motion capture real-time dance is, and you get to explain it to them for the first time, and your explanation doesn't have to be the same as anyone else's. I mean, maybe that's disingenuous, but it's art. Like, whatever, deal with it. You know, if
Yeah,
you're the first person who got to explain to me what dance was, you don't have to go through the Western canon. You could chuck that straight out. And
yeah,
I would never know, you
yeah. No,
know?
yeah, I see what you mean. Like that, I think that's a beautiful power of coming to this to tech or whatever from an outside kind of point of view. So yeah, I'm super excited about. For me, it's like about what does this tech allow me to do that I otherwise wouldn't be able to, and especially when coming to like, okay, how can we have live dance performance in a virtual in VR? I didn't have a headset. I'm not from that like gamer community, so like it allows me, and I thought like, okay, I don't want to be represented as an avatar. Hence,
Yeah.
like, going to thinking about volumetric video, because I want to be, there as Valencia James in my true appearance.
Yeah.
Because, as a Black femme, I'm not really in those spaces anyway. So how
Yeah.
can we circumvent that? Yeah. But curious about the language that comes out from that. We'll see.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I'm not usually a person that's very obsessed with language. Like as an artist, I'm more interested in sound and duration and movement and performance. But there was something that struck me about the way that you were speaking about the project, and then others that I thought, what would be, like if this was a play and he was, or some of your collaborators were one character and you were another. I might be like trade parts. You speak about your thing, but with Valencia's words, right? Like I want to kind of see what would happen in that case. My puppy, he's like 9 months old. He's such a
Yeah,
crazy one.
what's his name?
His name is Cowboy. He's nine
Cowboy.
months old. He's a COVID puppy, but
Oh,
he's just,
oh, yeah.
he's
That's
now like
cool. And
crying.
then they're doing some kind of work in my hallway. I'm so sorry. That might affect the sound quality of this, but it's life, right? Real
It's
life.
life.
Oh yeah.
Cowboy. But yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to see as an experiment. Like, what if you could only explain the hardware only using the like neural net trained on Valencia's words? Like, what would that be, right? Or if you could only talk about how to assemble the hardware, but you could only use the community language of the dancers, what would that be like? Like, I don't know, just kind of things like that, that it would make the whole process so sound as radical as it is. And I thought that might be fun or interesting or cool, like even in the way that you show people how to assemble these kits, or when you're talking about how to charge them, or all the kind of, I really love, obviously I love Afrotectopia because I got to go to the first one of those conferences at ITP, and I loved how everything that was like source code, and the from the graphic design to the ways in which you would sign up for the Slack, you could just tell this was a different group that was making this than had ever made a conference at ITB before. And it
Mhm.
was so amazing. I felt like every part of the conference was touched that way. Like even when you showed up to get your ticket, like Ashley Jane Lewis is there being like, "Hi!" It's just like so excited, and like it's so much energy. And like mostly ITP things, when you go, people are like wandering around, and you're like, is there a thing happening there? And they're like, oh, I don't know, I'm just standing here. And you have to like wander around, keep trying to find it, but it was like Ashley Jane Lewis with her table right in front of the door with the stack of like sweatshirts. And, it was just so different. Like every moment of that conference was different. And I wonder about that with your project too. Like if every, like I love the kit that has the eyeball on it, like the little, like the googly eyeball, that was really different. And then I wanted them to also kind of even talk about the hardware in a way that is like you could just tell this is made by dancers. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but yeah, that part. I think that's something really great for like the future of like the residency programs, because we just had this pilot where we invited like 7 multidisciplinary artists to just come and learn with us. Well,
Yeah.
I was like, I need to learn about how to make virtual environments. Like I want to do it in community. So that was really great. But that could be what we did do is think about shared values. But I think
That's my son. Sorry about
But
that.
yeah, it's cool. So, I think in the future we can think about lexicon, right? How do we talk about these technologies that we're using?
And maybe now, like you said, it's the pilot group. So maybe that group then learns how to onboard the next group and teaches them, and then that's where you'll get that lexicon. Like don't tell them what they're supposed to say. Don't tell them how they're supposed to explain it. Don't tell them what parts are important and what parts should be chucked out, because like maybe they have interesting opinions. Focusing the technology around this pilot group could be really fascinating. And this kind of goes back to something that you've talked a lot about, like hardware versus fidelity versus cost versus accessibility, right? And I think a lot about that about your project. Like there are lots of parts, and there are a lot of places that you could be really innovative. You could be innovative around the cost because it's an incredibly inexpensive kit. It could be innovative around the hardware because it's, you could kind of move in that direction. This could really be an open source hardware project, or a product that you sell and you market and you become a hardware company. Or it could be something that's radically accessible. And when things are radically accessible, it may not matter if it's that radical of hardware. It could be like, well, you could buy this at any Walmart. It's in the toy section, and it's a toy SpongeBob camera, but it's really easy to plug in. You know what I mean? Like if it's like, well, we don't care about the other things, we care about accessibility. You can say, I'm going to use these off the shelf things that are easy for people to find, or easy to onboard, or easy to replace, or whatever the thing is, right? So yeah, I would love to hear some more thoughts about that, especially having learned from this first pilot group.
Yeah, I mean, so the kit, I have it here without the googly eyes.
Awesome.
We found that the sock might have been like hindering my audio, but I don't know, we'll see. But yeah, this was the brainchild of Saurabh Louis. Was one of my amazing collaborators, and he was like, I don't care about 3D virtual environments, like what are the dancers or what are movement artists gonna use if they need to like if they can't afford like one of those strong computers for virtual, those kind of uses. So it was like, okay, let's bring the tools, that's more affordable and accessible. And so, yeah, I mean, it started with that. So we used, so I guess I'll show again. There's a Raspberry Pi, which is a really tiny computer. And this is like a display screen, because as dancers, we love like mirrors.
You gotta frame it. Yeah.
You gotta see the immediate visual feedback. And then for this, we went with Intel RealSense depth camera, which is one of the more like cheaper like depth cameras out there. We started the experiments with an Azure Connect, which is it's more expensive and it requires an actual heavyweight computer. And then this tiny microphone that would have a sock, and that's where we stuck. This is where Thomas Wester stuck the googly eyes on. And this tripod. So basically it's like, kind of ordered off the shelf things, components put together, and Glowbox, which is one of our amazing collaborators. They like really found a way to mount these kind of components together. So yeah, for us, it's like how to first of all make it cheap enough to for movement artists to use. But then with that comes the trade-offs, like with this depth camera, it's not as accurate as say the Azure Connect, but it does, we got it to, we tweaked like the software works to like get a really nice representation. It's quite the kind of video is like quite pixelated. So that's also, we can use it as an aesthetic. And I saw like the cohort, they really embrace that aesthetic. And that's the other thing about volumetric video now. It's beautiful, like kind of this ephemeral quality of the pixels and how it moves, especially when it comes to dancing bodies. So it's an interesting way of how you can use what the technology gives in an artistic way for artistic expression. But then, it's not going to be as crisp as say like, a normal video, like what you see now, like it's so, but how can we use that and how can it push us forward? I think one limitation for me has been like, how do you place the camera and how can you be able to dance in a more expansive way? Because we're in our living spaces and then I have a nice big living room, but then I'm still having to have like a 2 by 2 meter box. So I'm essentially moving like on the spot.
Yeah.
So how does that transform my practice? And so it's different kind of trade-offs, but But what we come to is like how these limitations actually push forward our creativity.
Absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
it definitely makes me think that, dancers are like, they're incredible at moving around space. So your small room on motion capture, even if it's a really big motion capture studio, it's like it's not the stage, right? It's not as big as the stage or as expansive in that like bleeding in and out. And then dance for film is a little different, right? Like you some suddenly when you're dancing for film, maybe it mattered more what your face looked like, or it didn't on the stage. No one cares what your face looks like, right? So maybe dancers in film had to have more facial expressions. And so I wonder if for mocap we'll see a different type of dancer flourishes in that medium. But I also wonder if it might include some dancers that felt limited by the stage or film. I'm also thinking of people whose bodies are differently abled, right? Like, because I could imagine if I wanted to just motion capture my hands and the movement of my hands in a space, in one of your virtual worlds where my hands were as large as you when you're in the headset and you just see my hands the size of forests, right? Like that's something you could do in VR. But if I was someone who mostly did my movement with my hands, that wouldn't be very interesting on a stage, right? People would be like, I can't see what she's doing. But that would be very compelling in VR if you were somebody who primarily danced with your hands, right? And so I don't know, it might unlock uh, a differently abled way of expressing the human body as well. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. That is compelling. Like, because when I'm thinking about how we're who we're reaching out to in this, I was thinking about accessibility, digital accessibility. And so we in the cohort we have Antoine Hunter, who's a deaf choreographer and dancer based in the San Francisco Bay Area. And so it was really great to think together with the space of like online um, you know immersive environments, and how does that relate, or how does that um you know give rise to creativity for that he can also access that space as a creator, as well as those who would actually watch the work.
Yeah.
But yeah, very interestingly, also like on that note of like how might a differently abled body um, engage with this. We found some really interesting innovations with how the camera is placed, because people had like very small spaces. So maybe
Totally.
Remy Harris, who's a movement artist, part of the cohort, she actually mounted her camera on her like on the corner of her ceiling. And so that might be another way of a different way of seeing the body. And
Totally.
so yeah.
Yeah. No, that's so fascinating. And I really loved Anton's piece, especially, he's kind of really famous in the Bay Area as a leader in dance. Like so many people have taken classes from him. He's just like, pro. Like he's been around a really long time, like taught everybody who's anybody in the Bay. And so it was really great to see him in VR. Um, and I thought he seemed so fluent with it. And I wonder if that was just that he's such a pro, like he's done dance in so many different, and been a choreographer and so many different, like the evolution of dance in his lifetime. Um, I wonder, do you have people that are very early in their career in dance, like discovering something about movement and about themselves through this process?
Well, not as movement artists, but there is like Alim Ringo. They're at school in Portland, Oregon. They're an interdisciplinary artist working with like sculpture and sound, and so it's been really amazing to see their how they're thinking about immersive web space and virtual environments in relation to movement, because they also use their body in their installations.
Oh,
So
interesting.
yeah,
So it's
so
very
yeah,
similar, I guess, to like in virtual space where you have the body as the object in dance, but then it's also you can place it anywhere in the world, right? That's very
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. And so Alim and Remy collaborated on this beautiful piece where it's set in on a lunar surface, and thinking of planets and presence of the body in this lunar surface and sound. It was just so totally immersive. And then there's Terry Ayana Wright and Carlos Johns Davila created a whole world from like found objects in their living spaces, but they're like very precious cultural objects. Like Carlos is from Peru, and so he had this beautiful uh, quilts that became like the actual surface.
Yeah, I loved that. It was like a mountain of a quilt. It's
Right,
really
yeah.
cool. I spent like a lot of time in that flute, I have to say.
Oh, yeah. So you did.
It
Oh,
was
right.
great. I really liked the lunar experience too. I loved that sort of gateway. I wanted that to like also be bodies. That's kind of where I thought of like this forest. It felt like a forest of movement. I love all of the spaces because especially since adding the dancer's body just made my mind have so many like parallel experiences, you know.
Mm.
VR is so trippy that way, which is really wonderful. um yeah, well, I'm so excited about your project. I can't wait to see all, you know, all the versions of these projects and continue to share it with the rest of the community.
Reading one of your articles last night, and one thing that was really profound for me was like the idea of like the actions that you do now with has carries over for 7 generations, and we're living the results of the actions of our ancestors from 7 generations before. It was so profound. I was like, wow, I'm gonna take that one.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't invent it, so like for sure take it. I think of us like time traveler, or like that's what I think of time travel as being like communicating from my ancestors to my descendants. And so I
Yeah.
think we're always in a state of time traveling. It's not about my body physically going somewhere, but like being in a strong communion with the past and the present and the future. When I was growing up, I used to feel like that was a lot of pressure. I mean, it is a lot of pressure. You're like, oh my God, if I do something wrong, it's going to be like. But then I started thinking about it less about being a responsibility in that Western thing of like, you're going to mess it up or not. And I started thinking that it's more like understanding my actions as part of like an abstract whole. And that if I could see my life that way, I would be closer to happiness and to my purpose if I wasn't seeing like this myopic view of the now.
Mhm.
That it would connect me more to reality. And that's the reality, not like maybe this like Western capitalist labor hours that my body will do for capitalism. You know, like maybe that's not real. Maybe the reality is this like this larger continuity. So I do think it's less about like doing it like don't fuck up and more about don't get lost.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And understanding. I love the actual the shifting like ideas of time, right? That
Yeah,
the past and the future are together with the present.
totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I don't think the Western idea of time seems very right. And
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't seem to fit into a lot of other cultures. You know,
Mm-hmm.
all you have to do is go and live with a different culture who has a different sense of time, and then you're like, oh yeah, that was really relative. You know, like this hurried pace is very relative if it's going to take a half an hour to cross the road, regardless of if I'm stressed about it. So it's like time can be different. It can feel different. Like I lived in Central America when I was like a teenager till when I was an adult. And yeah, time moved so differently there because people just accepted that it moved at the pace of humans, and that was just the reality. You were kind of an idiot if you thought you could like hurry things up by yelling or being panicked about it. Like it's literally not going to change the like 18, you know, cows that are in the street. Like you're just going to have to get out and like have a coffee and talk to me, unless you just want to be an asshole. You know, like I don't know, there's just this acceptance of like what is wrong with you that you can't do that. And so, yeah, it doesn't take much to just get a different perspective on time. To you're like, oh yeah, um, maybe it's even larger than that slower pace. It's actually a pace that's a little bit more connected to other generations. So I have even less control than I thought. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, right. Yeah, again, the collective, being part of the collective rather than this individualistic way of moving through the world. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm curious, what are you working on these days?
I just started this weird collective called No Funding Creative Collective. And it's like we meet once a week and we talk about creative ideas. And it's like no funding, no striving, no hustling. I guess no point, nothing. I don't know. It goes on and on and on. But I wanted to be more in communion with people in a way that didn't have as much of a purpose, except that just talking about an idea would be the purpose. I made this thing called the Stupid Hackathon. I don't know if you ever heard of this, but we
I never got to like go on. Do you have any like documentation on it? I haven't.
Yeah, for sure. You go to stupidhackathon.com
Okay.
and it was called Stupid Shit No One Needs and Terrible Ideas Hackathon. And we would always find our people. Like so many stupid hackathons happen all over the world, so many different cities. It became like this weird phenomenon for a while. And I always thought that's really funny. Like we didn't have to explain it too much before all the people that were like-minded would just come and be like, yeah, I get this. This is my shit. I'm going to hack all this weird stuff. It's going to be totally ridiculous. It was always had this way of like punching up to the power that was sort of the status quo of the tech world or of the art world. And we didn't have to like explain that. It just happened because it's like you give permission for someone to do something that's like stupid and pointless. It just opened up these areas, this like imagination. And I remember we got on the front page of Hacker News, like the first hackathon, or maybe it was the second hackathon we had. It got all this press from like the Guardian and like TechCrunch and all. Just it got this like news cycle going. And Hacker News was so angry. We were on the front page because everyone's like, who gave them permission to do this? And I was like, what? And so I like made this like Photoshop document that was like permission. And then it was like to do this. And then I like put that on the Hacker News and I was like, here's my certificate of permission to do this. And they're like, of course, that made them really mad too. And they were just like, how come these women are allowed to like joke around about beauty standards when we can't even talk about how women look at work? You're like, yeah, it's almost as if that's different. But, but it was like those kind of things. Like we have permission to talk about subjects they're not allowed to talk about. That's not fair. But also we weren't a company. We were just people getting together and making things, which is like not illegal. So it was very interesting how upset people got about it. And it was a very simple idea of like, what if you were to take an enormous amount of brain power to do something really stupid? That should be okay. I don't know why it pissed people off so much. And so I'm kind of doing this same thing, but instead of it being stupid, although I love stupid things, like don't get me wrong, I'm still 100% for stupid. It's just about like, it's not about like getting funding, getting fame, getting status, like literally you just are interested about a weird thing and you would like to talk about it with some other people. And yes, most of us happen to be artists and recovering strivers, but like in this, for this 1 hour of this week, it's not about any of that. It's just kind of like, can we, and I hate Zoom and everything, but like, that's all like, what are you going to do? So it's like, it's going to be on Zoom and I have this like very strict format so that it can stay, I think the more constraints you have and the more strict a format you have makes the participants feel like they can do anything. I don't know why that is, but I found that out with the Stupid Hackathon when I was like, it cannot make sense. It cannot be useful. Then people were like, great. So like, it gave them these like permission to just do something really like they couldn't fuck it up unless they tried too hard. So don't try too hard. So I want it to be like that. It's just you take this 1 hour to do something that like no one is ever going to give you funding for ever. That's what I'm doing right. This is my week, Valencia. I don't know. is what I'm doing right now. But in general, I'm doing more stuff with like wampum.codes and everything. But that's, but like, you asked me today. That's what I'm doing today.
No, I love it. Thank you for sharing.
Obviously, anyone who's watching can join. Just ask Valencia; she'll give you the link. But yeah, I don't know. We need more. You're doing such a great job making a community, but I like need another one. I feel like my communities all got really serious, and I need a really not serious one now. So.
Yeah, I mean that's for me. It's like how do you keep building that and keep reaching out? I'm new at this, so at the community. So
Yeah, I mean, well, I've done it in all the terrible wrong ways. So like, I gotta figure out. The stupid hackathon was perfect though. That's a great one.
that sounds great. Sounds
Yeah,
great.
that one was
Welcome.
bang on. But I've done a lot of ones that were terrible. So it's like, I mean, not terrible. Like, I don't think I've ever built like abusive communities or something like that. But I've done ones that exhausted me, where I just like had to like, I built this whole thing and then I had to like, oh god, like it was too much. It was like I built it too big on too small of an Amelia.
Mm. And then what did you do? Were you able to pass it on to someone else, or did you just kind of let it?
Yeah, I was like, I know how to do 5 of these 10 things I need to do. I'll find like 3 people who know how to do But that's good. Sometimes people who start things aren't the best one to run them. Sometimes you are though. It just depends. It depends what you started, right?
Right. Yeah. That's great. That's great when you can find someone to keep it going, or
Totally.
or say like, okay, maybe that was good for one run.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's also okay to do that. Like the stupid hackathon doesn't feel like the moment with Zoom World, because it was very tactile and in person, and I just don't like, people have asked me like, don't you think you want to do that virtually? But I don't think it works. So some things you could start aren't going to be the right thing forever, as the world changes, and that's okay.
Maybe it evolves like into this
no funding.
No funding.
No funding. I don't know. That will be really easy to attain. If someone tries to give us money, we'll just be like, no.
Yeah, I wonder, because the best things come out of that kind of space. I find like when you do find something that's really like, well, who knows? Like maybe it's something that can circumvent like that whole like capitalist kind of system of the funding and grants and stuff.
I hope so. I know already somebody who joined was like, I've been teaching artists how to like build on Ethereum blockchain so that they can have like a decentralized network of community support. And I was like, I don't know, that sounds close to funding. You might have to leave the group. We might have to kick you out, man. He's like, no, I promise, it's not going to be about funding. I'm like, okay, I'm watching you.
But what about like self-sustaining practices?
That's what he was saying. He's now you're on his side. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens. Maybe if by trying to not find funding, we'll find a way to never need funding. That would be awesome.
Yeah, sounds inspiring.
That's a dream.
Yeah, you post it, please.
I will. I'll send you the link, and then if anyone who watches this wants to join, you can decide. Like, you don't have to invite everyone. Just the cool people.
Yeah, no, don't worry. Yeah, I won't let it out.
Yeah, be like, if someone's like, "Oh, can I join that?" and you're like, "Oh, it's full." It's like, they're like, "Well, you just invited my friend." But it'll be good. I think it's so hard to find community during quarantine. We're like losing our minds in this space. So hopefully you've been doing a great job, and we'll keep trying, keep iterating. Maybe our 2 communities can have like a powwow sometime.